Welcome to this podcast on solution development. This will involve a discussion about questions related to the understanding of programming and problem solving in the field of information technology. These topics are from question 5 of the 2024 Information Technology or IT November Theory exam. There are 3 ways that you can engage with the content of this podcast. If you want to test your knowledge, then download the questions covered in the video. There's a link to a PDF in the video description. Then attempt these questions and then come back and listen to the answers and compare them with your answers. Or if you want to use the podcast to learn new information, then first listen to the discussion, then download the questions that we mentioned earlier from the PDF document, and then test yourself to see how much you remember from this discussion. Or you can simply enjoy the discussion and learn more about solution development in the IT field. So let's hear what our podcasters have to say about solution development. Welcome to this podcast on the solution development question from an IT Paper 2 theory exam from 2024. And this question is going to revolve a lot around the programming and the algorithms that are used and to assess our understanding of coding. Not just if we can create code, but can we interpret code and find out how it all fits together. So I'm going to go through each question individually and try to give you the best answer for each one. So let's get stuck into it. Here we've got our first question, 5.1. We've got the date of a marathon is assigned to a string variable in the following format. It's day / month / year. And there we can see an example. I'll start off with 5.1.1. And which one of the following options, so this is just an A or a B option, that is the correct code that extracts the month from the date. So we know that the month is those characters. So there's the 1 and the 0 that forms the 10. That is the month. So we're going to obviously copy from this string. So there's 2 copy functions and they both copy from the variable and they both start at position 4. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. That is correct. We're starting to copy from the 4th character. But one has 5 and one has 2. So what is that parameter in the copy function? Well, if you remember your copy function, we copy from the string starting at that position, and the second argument, the second parameter is always how many characters do you want to copy. So if we want to copy 5 characters, we're going to copy the 1, the 0, the slash, the 2, and the 0. Is that the date? No, that's not. In this case, we're copying 2 characters, which is the 1 and the 0. Just that. So that's actually the correct option. So B is our answer in this case. Now we're going to move to 5.1.2, and the variable month has been declared as a string variable and has been used to extract the month correctly. So let's assume that's all done correctly. But there's a syntax error when we use it in a case statement over here. So they use it in a case. Obviously, they're going to try to figure out if it's month 1, then we must maybe say the word January. If it's month 2, it's going to be the month February. That's what I would assume. They ask, give a reason why we have a syntax error over here. So they say that there's some sort of error over here. It doesn't like this code, the case statement. And if you know your case statements only work with ordinal types. I'm going to just write some notes here. So for those of you who don't know or have forgotten, ordinal sounds like the word order. So it can only work with variables that have a particular order to it. So for example, if I have an integer, if I gave you the number 8, you know that the next number after 8 will be a 9, and you know that the number before it will be a 7. So an integer is an example of an ordinal type. So it can work with integers. However, if I look at reals, if I gave you the number 8.5, do you know what the next number is? Well, if you said it's 8.6, well, are you sure? Couldn't it have been 8.51 or 8.501 or 8.50001? It's very difficult to know what the next number is in a sequence of reals. So that's why a real variable is not an ordinal type. Now, when I come to strings, if we have the word hello, do you know what the next word is in sequence? No, there's no order to it. It doesn't take language in that case. So string is not an ordinal type. But if I took, for example, a char, like a character, if I took, for example, the character D, you know that the next character would be a E and the character before it would be a C. So characters would also be a good example of an ordinal type. So those are our 2 main ordinal types.
the string is going to be a problem. So it doesn't like using strings in case statements because it does not have an ordinal type. So that would be the reason why you've got a syntax error. And that's probably going to lead into our question B, which says, explain how line 1 can be changed to make the code correct. Now, remember, we extracted the month as a string, but it's still technically a number. We know that it's going to be a 10. If our formats are always correct, then we know that S month will be a number. It's just in a string format. So what I would do then to correct that first line, if we say case S month of, we know that that string doesn't work, but we can convert that string into a ordinal type. Which one? That's integer is our option there. So I would convert this from a string to an int. And then in that way, we're going to convert that 10, the string 10, into a number 10, and then that will be able to be used in the case statement. They're asking us in the question to explain what we would do. So I would say convert S month into an integer by using the string to int function. So that's what I would do. So let's move on to 5.2. A string grid component in Delphi is an effective way of processing data in rows and columns. And we've got the following: write code that will display the text personnel in the correct cell of the string grid component. So that's the name of the string grid, and that is our string grid over there. So let's see if we can do this one. So the first thing is we know that it's a string grid, so it's going to be stg data. That is the name of the string grid. And what property are we changing? We're changing the cells property. And then we're going to have to give it some sort of X and Y value or some sort of number. Now, if you remember, with string grids follow an alphabetical order. So that's how I remember it. So which is alphabetically first, rows or columns? It's columns. So it'll first be the column, and then it'll be the row that it must go into. Now, I don't know what those are yet. We still got to figure them out. But we would say the string grid's name dot cells, square bracket, the column value, comma, the row value, and that's going to equal or be assigned to a particular string value. And in this case, the string value will be that name that we want to put into that block. So that's already the start of the line of the code. So we know that's what we want. But now we've got to figure out these numbers. What are the actual numbers, the rows and the columns? So if we look over here, remember columns are going up and down. So there are a couple of columns here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you remember correctly, string grids start. The first column is actually not column 1, it's column 0. So this is column 0, so therefore this is going to be column 1. So we're going to change that to column 1. Then we need to figure out the rows. Rows are going from left to right. That is a row, that is a row. There are 4 rows in total, but if I remember, we said the first is always starts at 0. So that is actually row 0. This is row 1, row 2, and row 3. So therefore, we're going to have to change that value to a 3. So if we wanted to put a value into that block, we would say the string grid's name dot cells, square brackets, column 1, row 3, and then it is assigned to the value of the string that we want to put in there. So that is how we would do 5.2. 5.3, we want to determine the value of D in the following expression. So they give me this whole thing and they give me a couple of values. Okay, so straight away I'm just looking here. There's a mod and there's a not, and there's an and and an or in this. This whole thing is some sort of condition or Boolean argument. I don't know if you picked that up. This is actually not going to give me a particular number value. This is asking questions. So this is actually a Boolean value. So we're going to have to type in the word true or false for this. So let's see if we can work this out. So I've typed out the expression. Now these equals are not saying assign 1 to that value. This is asking is A minus C equal to 1. These are questions. So let's start by putting in the values first. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, well, we've got C. We can see C is a negative 4. So I will put in negative 4 is equal to 12, which is B. That's 12 mod 5. So just replacing the values, and then we go to and not. Now I know it's not in brackets, but I'm just going to put not of the E. We see E is false. So not of false, or, and A is a 5. So in brackets, we're going to put 5 minus C, which is negative 4. And that's going to equal to 1. So let's make this a bit wider. So there's my expression. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to work out the things in brackets. So that is something we can work out first. That is something we can actually work out first. And that's something we can work out. We don't do the ands and the ors. We're going to first do these expressions. So they are asking questions. So let's do this. 12 mod 5. What is the remainder if we took 5 into 12? So the way I think of it is this. If you have 12 students and you want them to get into groups of 5, how many students, mod will say how many students did not get into a group of 5. So if I've got 12 students and I ask them to get into groups of 5, there'll be one group of 5, there'll be another group of 5, but then that'll be 10 students. Who's left over? There's 2 students who can't form a group of 5. So this is actually going to equal to a 2. 12 mod 5 is equal to 2. So it's asking the question, is negative 4 equal to 2? Are 2 and negative 4 the same thing? No, they're not. So that block is actually a false. That expression is a false. And now we've got not false. So it's not false, so it's the opposite of false. What's the opposite of false? It's true. So that expression is actually true. And then we're going to have our or, and now we're going to come over here. 5 minus negative 4. Now, if you know your mathematics, 5 minus a negative number is actually 5 plus a number. It's not 5 minus 4 becomes a 1. That might be confused there. But 5 minus a negative 4 means 5 plus 4. Hopefully you've got a calculator in your exam. You could have used that as well and typed it in. 5 minus a negative 4 means 5 plus 4, which means 9. Is 9 equal to 1? Are 9 and 1 the same number? No, that's not. So that's also false. That was sneaky because if you didn't put in that negative, you might have easily gone 5 minus 4. It's a 1. Those two are true, so it must be true. Very sneaky. Okay, so we over here now. Now, when you've got multiple conditions with ands and ors, you always do the ands first. So technically we're going to do false and true first, and then once we've got that answer, it'll go up against the false. So let's ask the question. And means they must both be true for the whole thing to be true. Here we've got a false and a true. So therefore, because there's one false, this whole thing is actually false. Remember, and says both must be true for the whole thing to be true. So we've got false from that bracket or false. Now, with or, at least one of them must be true for the whole thing to be true, but we don't have any trues here. So therefore, false or false just means false. So my answer is therefore false. Now, just take note that they do say 4 marks and they say show all the steps. So don't just go right, oh, the answer is false. You need to do something like this to indicate where you worked out that it is false. So that's how I would do that question. Then 5.4, an array named array names has been declared to store up to 8 names. The array currently contains 7 names. The variable number of elements stores the number of names stored in the array. So I'm assuming number of elements will have 7 because there's 7 elements there. A new name must be inserted at any position of array names. A partially completed pseudocode has been done for insertion. So for example, so we get input, we get in the name that we want to insert. They actually give us the value or the position. So position number 3 or 4 that we want to insert into the array. And then they gave this code. If the position is greater than 8 or it's less than 1, in other words, it's outside of my range, then you can't do that because it's out of our range. Else, write code to complete this part of the algorithm. So complete the pseudocode using a loop. So we want to insert this name into that position without losing any of the names currently stored. So if we want to, for example, they give us an example here. If that name was inserted at position 2, you can see it's at position 2, but do you see Brian, Claire, Tabisa? They all got shifted up 1 position. Okay, so this is an insert into an array algorithm. So how can we do that? So I've got over here just an example over here. So we're going to do this type of thing. Okay, so let's say we want to insert, let's pretend our pos is equal to 2 because that's the position that we want to insert the name in. Before we can insert the name in, we actually need to shift these all up. I need to basically go from 2 until 7. Okay, so we're going to go from the position, we're going to loop from the position 2 until 7, not 8, but till how many elements there are. That's what we're technically doing. And we're going to shift them up. Now, this is the tricky part. If I start at position 2 and say, hey, put 2 into position 3, it'll do that. And guess what? We've just lost Claire's name now. So we can't actually start at position 2. You actually have to start at the back here. You've got to first move Dean, and then the next one, and then the next one. So you're shifting from the back. So we're not actually looping from 2 to 7. We actually looping from 7 to 2. Now you could write pseudocode, you could probably write Delphi code, but we're going to loop from the number of elements. We're going to start from 7. So we're going to loop from our num elements And we're going to go backwards now. Remember in Delphi, if you want to go in reverse order in a for loop, we go down 2. I know it's not exactly Delphi code, but I'm just saying down 2 so they can see that we're going in reverse. We're going to go down to the position that we want to insert. So we're going to go down to our pos. Is that the variable that they give me? Oh, it's our position. Sorry, let's make it our position. So we're going to loop from the number of elements down to that. So what are we going to do? So our looping variable, so let's put a little r there, loop r from our number of elements. So our looping variable is going to start off being a 7. So we want 7 to be in 8. We want 6 to be in 7. So we technically want to change not the 7th one, but the one after the 7th one. So we want to then say the array, which our array is called array names, we don't want to insert a new value into 7, which is what r will be. We want to insert a new value into 8, which is I plus 1. So into r plus 1, which is 8, we're going to change that value. So you can put a little arrow there, or equal to sign is going to be assigned the value that is in array names, but at position r. We're going to say, if we start at 7, we're going to say position 8 must equal to 7. So Dean must go there. Our loop is at 7, and we're going to say 7 plus 1 is going to equal to 7. Then the loop's going to go down to 6. What is 6 plus 1? That is 7. 7 is going to equal to 6. So that name is going to go into there. Then R is going to become a 5. What is 5 plus 1? That's going to be 6. 6 is going to equal what is 5. So that one's going to go into there. And then it's going to become a 4. So what's 4 plus 1, which is 5? 5 is going to equal to what is in 4. So we're going to put 4 in there. And then we're going to say 3. What's 3 plus 1? That is 4 is going to equal to what is in 3. So put 3 in there. And then R is going to become 2, which is the last one. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 is going to become whatever is in 2. So Brian is going to go into there. So that's what it's going to look like. We've shifted them all down. I know Brian's in twice, but we've shifted them all down. That's my loop. Once I've done my loop, I think my loop is then technically done. We've finished with the loop. Once we are done, we can now put our new name, which if I remember correctly was ISO. Whatever the name is, we're going to get that name from S name and we're going to put it into that position at position 2. So all I'm going to do is go, okay, array names, but at position R position. That's where we want to insert the new one. Remember, our position, we said is a 2. At position 2, we're going to put in the value S name, which was that input that we got. We got that input at that position. So at that position, put that name. So in this case, we got ISO. So we're going to go to number 2. It's going to go, okay, that one must change to. So now we've inserted everything. Now you might think, I'm done. It's all finished. But just remember, we're keeping track of how many elements are in the array. And we've just added one. How many elements are in my array at the moment? There are 8, but we still think that there are only 7. So you mustn't forget the last step, which is we must increase the number of elements, rnum elements. Now that's a Delphi function. You could have also said rnum elements is assigned a value of rnum elements plus 1. That could have also worked, but you're basically increasing rnum elements by 1 because now we want that to become an 8 to reflect that we've got 8 numbers. Obviously, you're inserting a new value, so it must go up by 1. So there we go. I think that is correct. That is the code I would put over here. So we're going to loop from the number of elements. Where did I get that from? That's the variable they gave me. Down to the position, which is the input. And we are going to shift all the values in the array up 1 position. Then we put in the new value into where we want to put it, and we increase number of elements. I do have a video on inserting elements into array. If you want to clarify or revise that concept, here's a link in the video description to it, as well as over there. You can see the video over there. I would go watch that if you need to understand this algorithm a little bit better. Okay, we're on our last question, 5.5, and we're dealing with objects. So we're given the following extract from the runner_u class file. So there we can see there's a T runner, there's some private attributes, we've got some public functions and procedures and constructors. Number 1, which keyword in the class definition above indicates that the attributes are not accessible outside the class? what are the values that are not accessible? That means that things are private. That is actually the key word. Private is the answer. Anything that's declared under private can only be accessible from within this class. The stuff under public can be accessible from outside the class that's connected to it, but private means only over here. So I can use frunner no inside this class, but I can't use frunner no outside of this class to access the stuff inside here. So the answer to that is private. Next, we need to say which method will be called to instantiate the runner object. So instantiate, we're talking about declaring it, to breathe life into it. In that case, it's going to be this, your constructor create. I'm just going to go over here. That's going to be the method that you use to instantiate the object. You could say the constructor, you could say the create method. That is the one that instantiates the object. Next, 5.5.3, the code provided shows some methods that describe the behavior of a runner. One of the accessor methods has already been declared. Write down the declaration of any other accessor method that can be used. Now, accessor methods means we use that to access these fields. Remember, because we said they're private, we can't use them outside of the class. But if we have accessor methods, it's a way that we can get to them and control what information we send out. Accessor methods are get. We want to get that information and it's returning an information. So it's normally a function. So if I look through my list of options there, we can see function get name is an accessor method. It's a way for outside this class to access the name attribute. We just have to declare any of the accessor methods. So we don't have to write the code for just the declaration. And we've got three other options. So we've got the name. We can do one for runner number, qualifier, or marathons. Now, runner number and marathons are going to be very similar because they're both integers that are being returned. So any of these would be a potential option. So we know that they're going to be functions. So we say function, and then we normally call them get. So I would say get runner no would be a potential one. It doesn't take in any parameters. It just returns something. So in this case, it would return an integer. So that would be a potential answer. You can get marks for that. Maybe you want to do one of the other ones. Maybe you want to return the number of marathons. So this would be get num marathons. So I'll call it get with the name of the attribute, and we are going to return an integer. So I'll put an integer over there. That's the other option. Those two are very similar. But the other one, if you did qualify, that's slightly different because it's a Boolean value. So we would then say function get qualify. So get the value to see if they qualify, and that would return a Boolean value. So you could have put any one of those, and then you would have gotten the 2 marks for that question over there. So those are the accessor methods. Then our last question, identify the mutator method and explain the purpose of a mutator method. So a mutator method is a way that we can actually change these values. Remember, we can't access them from outside the class, but if we have a mutator method, it allows us to mutate or change the values. Those tend to be procedures. Then nothing's been returned. They just say, hey, change runner number to this or change name to this. It's setting them to a particular value. So we're looking for procedures and the word set. And there I can see that is a mutator method because we are getting a value as a parameter and saying, hey, take that value and set qualifier to this new value. So we will then change f quality to f qualifier to whatever this value is going to be. So the answer is set qualifier would be the name of the mutator method. And what's the purpose of the mutator method? I would say it's to change the private f qualifier attribute in the class to the value that is being passed as a parameter. So anything along where you are using it to change an attribute, something along those lines would be a way to explain the purpose of it. We use it to change private attributes in the class. So something along those lines will get you the marks. And there we go. I think that's all of it done. Well done. We've done that question. We can now move on to the next podcast, which will probably be about the integrated scenario. Now, I know this podcast is on our computer terms channel, but for a lot of the information related to this podcast, you will find the answers to those type of concepts on our IT and CAT channel. So make sure you subscribe to that. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.